bone of my bone. The word did not begin with the scream of a child, but with the gasp of a woman realizing she was not alone. She woke to silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the deep, resounding quiet of completion. Her first sensation was not sight, but the cool, perfect air on her skin, and the profound, comforting rhythm of a heart beating near her, a sound that was both utterly new and deeply familiar, like a forgotten memory found. When she opened her eyes, the world exploded in color, emerald leaves, sapphire rivers, and the blinding gold of the sun filtering through the canopy. She was lying on more softer than any velvet, and over her stood the tallest, gentlest creature she had ever seen. He was broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of the deep morning sky, and he was watching her with an expression of astonished reverence. He did not speak a language she knew, yet she understood every syllable when he breathed, "This, finally, is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called Isha, woman, for she was taken out of Ish, man." Her own name, Chowa, life-giver, came later, but in that moment, she was simply the other. Adam, the man formed from dust, had been given the garden and a task. Eve, the woman formed from a piece of his sleep, was given something more, the mirror of companionship. She was not a solitary masterpiece like the great beast he had named, she was the missing echo, the vital symmetry that made the world entire. Her first breath was a question, her first meeting was the answer. Eden was not merely beautiful, it was obvious. Every leaf, every fruit, every waterfall declared its purpose in perfect harmony. There was no rot, no shadows that did not disperse, and no need that went unmet. Adam taught her the rhythms of their world, the naming of the creatures, the tending of the trees, and the long, easy conversations with the Creator in the cool of the evening. It was a world of effortless grace, save for one distinct landmark, the two trees at the center. The tree of life, Adam explained, touching its bark with gentle reverence. Its fruit grants us immortality, our rightful portion here. Then he pointed to its companion, an equally magnificent tree laden with fruit that glowed with an unnerving inner light. And that is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We may eat from every other tree, but we must not touch this one, or we will surely die. The word die was abstract, hollow. She understood life, for she was named after it, but death was an empty space in her vocabulary, like a color no eye could perceive. Adam's warning was serious, but his love was absolute, and Eve's trust in him and in the voice that walked with them was, initially, absolute too. Yet, the forbidden tree did something the others did not, it whispered. Not in sound, but in the constant, magnetic pull of its existence. Every time she passed it, her mind formed the same unvoiced question, what is evil, that knowing it is so dangerous? The serpent was not a crude creature of the dirt, but a thing of sinuous beauty, cold like polished bronze, moving with a fluid intelligence that surpassed the beast Adam had named. Unlike the others, it did not merely reflect nature, it seemed to question it. One morning, as Eve was drawing water by the river, the serpent was waiting, its eyes, the color of wet obsidian, fixed on her. Did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden? It asked. The voice was smooth, resonant, and carried a tone Eve had never encountered, sarcasm. Eve, surprised but unalarmed, laughed softly. No, of course not. We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden freely. It is only the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden that we may not eat. God said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. She spoke the prohibition firmly, but as she did, the serpent's gaze shifted, not to the tree, but to Adam, who was tending a distant vine. The serpent sensed the subtle difference between Adam's understanding of the rule and Eve's parroting of it. Adam had heard the rule directly. Eve had received it second-hand. Oh, the serpent drawled, tilting its head in mock pity. A prohibition so rigid, a threat so vague. How limiting for the lady of the garden. The encounter was brief, but the seed was planted, a gentle, persuasive insult to her status and her intellect. Eve walked away, her peace ever so slightly tarnished by a prickle of irritation. The serpent was patient, returning not with grand pronouncements, but with simple, rhetorical questions over several days. Each conversation began innocently, perhaps about the texture of a flower or the flight of a bird, but inevitably circled back to the single, luminous tree. "You speak of life, lady," the serpent murmured, draped artfully around a low branch, watching her fingers trace the curve of a fruit. "But what does your life truly contain? You only know good. Can a creature truly appreciate the light if it has never felt the dark?" Eve was now fascinated, drawn by the intellectual challenge. The Creator provides all good things. To know evil is to know disharmony. Why would I want that? Perhaps because true harmony requires choice, the serpent countered. The Creator knows that the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. He does not want a companion, he wants a child who remains perpetually ignorant of the vastness of existence. He threatens death only to preserve his own unique divinity. He fears your potential. This struck Eve to the core. Fear of her potential. Was their trust a leash? She looked from the serpent, whose claim felt plausible, to the tree, whose fruit looked dazzlingly wise, and then out to the vast, perfect garden. To be fully like him, to see the world not just as an inhabitant, but as a knower. The possibility was intoxicating. The dialogue had ended. The serpent was silent, waiting. Eve stood alone, the air thick with the scent of unchosen possibility. The prohibition was simple: do not eat, or you will surely die. The temptation was complex: eat, and you will become wise, truly living. She examined the fruit. It was beautiful to the sight, its skin shimmered with a spectrum of colors that seemed to shift with her gaze. It was good for food. She felt a sudden, sharp hunger that had nothing to do with the physical need of her perfect body, but a hunger of the mind. And it was desirable to make one wise, that final, irresistible pull toward maturity and self-determination. The decision was not a sudden, reckless act, but the slow, deliberate triumph of intellect over obedience. If God is good, how can knowledge be evil? If He is love, how can He truly withhold the capacity to see all of reality? Her fingers reached out. She did not pluck it violently, she simply took it, as one takes a gift long intended. The fruit felt dense, heavy with meaning. She raised it slowly to her lips. The first bite was a shock of sensation, sharp, bitter, and then overwhelmingly sweet, a flavor that seemed to etch itself directly onto the fabric of her being. She felt no immediate death, no physical harm, only an instantaneous, profound rush of clarity. She saw the perfect world, and for the first time, she saw the potential for its imperfection. The moment Eve swallowed the last piece, the clarity shattered into 1,000 shards of self-consciousness. She looked at the leaves, and they were still green, but she saw the process of decay they would someday undergo. She looked at the river, and she saw not just life, but the parched earth it could no longer reach. She looked at the serpent, and its bronze beauty was marred by a subtle, cold malevolence. Then she looked at herself. The cool air on her skin was no longer liberating, it was exposing. Her body, which had been a vessel of grace, was now a source of deep, burning vulnerability. The word she now knew was nakedness. Her immediate, frantic reaction was to share the knowledge, to have the overwhelming, raw reality she now possessed. She rushed to Adam, who had just returned from tending the trees. He saw the remnant of the fruit in her hand and the stark, new terror in her eyes. "Adam," she whispered, her voice rough with a strange new fear. "Eat. You must see. It is everything." Adam looked at the fruit, then at the tree, and finally at Eve, the reflection of his own essence. He did not debate, nor did he question the serpent's promise. He saw the chasm that had opened between his perfect innocence and her terrible, illuminated knowledge. He knew he could not bear to be separated from her in understanding. He took the fruit from her hand and ate. And then his eyes opened, and he saw his wife, not as a perfect complement, but as a naked, vulnerable creature. The shared vision of shame bound them instantly, irrevocably. In a desperate, mutual panic, they twisted fig leaves into clumsy coverings, the first act of human craft driven by fear. The heat of the day gave way to the gentle coolness of the evening, the familiar hour when the Creator walked the garden. This time, the sound of the approaching voice, the voice that had always been the sound of unconditional welcome, was a terrifying thought. Adam. Where are you? The voice was not accusatory, but deeply, sorrowfully present. Adam and Eve, tangled together behind the massive fig tree, felt the weight of their own knowledge. They knew, intimately, what it was to hide. Adam's voice was barely a rasp. I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself. Who told you that you were naked? The question was the final barrier between their old life and their new. It required honesty, but Adam's fear of the Creator was now competing with his newly acquired self-preservation. The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. Eve felt a sting sharper than any bee. He had passed the blame, not to the serpent, but to her and, subtly, back to the Creator himself, the woman you gave me. When the Creator turned to Eve, her own response was quieter, perhaps more honest. The serpent deceived me, and I ate. Deception was a new concept she had only just learned, and she used it to explain the unexplainable law of the forbidden. The silence that followed was heavier than the judgment itself. The pronouncements were delivered, not as flashes of lightning, but as immutable laws woven into the fabric of the cosmos. To the serpent, the Creator spoke of perpetual enmity, condemnation to crawl, to eat dust, and to forever struggle against the lineage of the woman. This was the first prophecy, the promise of a distant, necessary conflict. Then, the voice turned to Adam. Because you listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree, cursed is the ground because of you, in pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. The abstract threat of dying had become a concrete destiny, decay, struggle, and eventual non-existence. Finally, to Eve, the pronouncement was devastatingly personal, targeting the very essence of her name, Chowa, life-giver. I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception, in pain you shall bring forth children, your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. The pain of labor was a mystery that lay ahead, but the sorrow of conception, the knowledge that every life she brought forth would share the same curse of struggle and death, struck her with immediate grief. They were no longer the carefree tenders of a divine pack, they were laborers and mortals, bound by consequences. Before the expulsion, the Creator performed one last, inexplicable act of mercy. The flimsy fig leaves of their shame were insufficient. Taking the skin of an animal, the first death in the garden, a quiet, bloody sacrifice, he fashioned for them garments of true strength. The leather robes, warm and durable, represented both the immediate cost of their sin and a covering for their nakedness, a provision greater than any they could make for themselves. Clad in the rough, new clothes, they were led to the eastern gate. Adam walked with his head bowed, the weight of his task already pressing on him. Eve walked beside him, her gaze fixed on the tree of life. It stood within the boundary, a radiant beacon of the immortality they had just forfeited. Before them, the gate of Eden was sealed, not with stone, but with a terrifying, revolving blade of fire, a cherubim and a flaming sword, to guard the way back to eternal life. This was the final, undeniable sign that the old life was over. The journey out of Eden was short, just a few steps, but it was the longest journey any human would ever take. They looked back one last time. The air on their faces was suddenly different, dry, heavy, and carrying the chill of genuine effort. They were outside, in the wide, untamed world. Eve wrapped her arms around her husband, not just for comfort, but to feel the reassuring presence of the only piece of Eden she had been allowed to keep. Outside the gate, the world was beautiful, but relentless. The ground was hard, requiring Adam's sweat and the calloused hands of their mutual labor. The trees did not offer their fruit freely, they had to be persuaded, pruned, and fought for. The promise of pain in childbirth came true with the birth of her first son. It was agony unlike anything she could have imagined in the garden, a physical tearing that seemed to replicate the spiritual tearing that had exiled them. But when the child was finally laid in her arms, a new, fierce joy eclipsed the suffering. "I have acquired a man from the Lord," she declared, naming him Cain, acquired. She saw in him the first glimmer of hope, the start of the lineage promised to crush the serpent's dominion. Her second son, Abel, breath/vapor, was a quieter spirit. She taught them both, telling them the stories of the perfection they had lost, of the talking animals, the easy fruit, and the voice that walked in the evenings. She taught them the difference between the good they knew and the evil that now existed, subtly, in the corners of their minds. Eve, the first woman, stood not as the tragic figure of the fall, but as the architect of the future. She carried the pain and the consequences, but she also carried the knowledge of both good and evil, a terrifying, beautiful burden. Though she was exiled from the Garden of Immortality, she had become the necessary bridge between a perfect past and a challenging, fertile future. The first sin had led to the first expulsion, but it had also led to the first family, the first love stronger than fear, and the first enduring human hope. Please let us know what next video you want to see here. If this story resonated with you, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, Mrs. Evelyn Sampson TV, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next story. We encourage you to share your thoughts and your own stories of patience and faith in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep growing. The bitter harvest. The great irony of Eve's knowledge was that she knew the difference between good and evil, but she could not eradicate the evil that took root in her own children. Cain, the firstborn, was a man of the earth, stubborn and possessive of the soil that required his sweat. Abel, the younger, was a shepherd, content in the quiet contemplation of his flocks. They were the world's first opposites. The conflict began, as all sin does, with envy. They brought offerings to the Creator, Cain, the fruit of his grueling labor, the bitter harvest of the cursed ground, Abel, the firstborn of his flock, rich with fat and blood. When the voice acknowledged Abel's offering, the one given with the heart of sacrifice and trust, and looked away from Cain's, the wrath in Cain's heart was a physical presence. Eve saw the change in her son. His face, usually ruddy from the sun, was fallen and dark. She tried to warn him, speaking from her own experience, "Cain, the desire for destruction is waiting at the door of your heart. You must master it, or it will master you." But Cain, heir to Adam's self-preservation and Eve's painful self-awareness, could not be mastered by his mother's counsel. The two brothers went out to the field, the place of Cain's toil. Eve watched them walk away, a familiar fear twisting in her gut, the same fear she had felt when she first looked at Adam and saw his vulnerability. When Cain returned alone, his hands were red, not with the soil, but with the warm, terrible stain of his brother's life. The voice descended again, asking the most wrenching question of all, "Where is Abel, your brother?" Cain's defiant, chilling answer, "Am I my brother's keeper?" was the echo of Adam's earlier blame but magnified by murder. Eve rushed to the field. There, on the hard, cursed ground, lay the lifeless body of her son, Abel. His name, Vapor, had proven tragically prophetic. She collapsed, not in the physical agony of childbirth, but in the spiritual agony of a mother who had brought death into the world, only to have it consume her own child. This was the true taste of dying, the separation from life, violent and irreversible, inflicted by her own flesh. It was a wound that only time, the one commodity of their exile, could attempt to dull. Many generations passed. The world filled with their descendants, the fierce, wandering tribe of Cain, and the faithful, struggling line of Adam. Eve's hair was now white, her skin etched with the centuries of sun and sorrow, but her eyes retained the brilliant, unsettling clarity of the fruit. She was the matriarch of all humanity, the keeper of the most vital memory. In her final years, Eve was blessed with another son, whom she named Seth, appointed. For God has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. In Seth, she saw not the replacement for what was lost, but the quiet, enduring hope of the future. He was born after the trauma, a deliberate act of grace that affirmed her name, Chowa, the life-giver, even in the shadow of death. She would often sit with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, not as a penitent, but as a sage. She did not hide the story of the garden, she told it, vividly, honestly. She described the perfection they had lost, the lightness of life without labor, and the devastating choice she had made. I gave you the knowledge, she would tell them, touching their faces with hands that had known both perfect soil and bloody dirt. I opened the door to suffering, yes, but I also opened the door to choice, to courage, and to a love that is stronger than fear. Now you can choose the good, not from innocent blindness, but from informed will. That choice, your choice, is the greatest victory over the serpent. Her life, lived long and hard outside the gates of Eden, was the ultimate testament to human endurance. She had received a destiny of pain and lived a life of profound purpose. When her long life finally drew to a close, and Adam, her bone and her flesh, mourned her loss, Eve left the world knowing the full measure of what it meant to be human, to be born of perfection, to fall into complexity, and to generate an endless, hopeful line of life against the inevitability of the dust. Her curse was her crowning glory, for she was the mother of all who live. If this story resonated with you, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, Mrs. Evelyn Sampson TV, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next story. We encourage you to share your thoughts and your own stories of patience and faith in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep growing. Please let us know what next video you want to see here. Please subscribe to my channel, Mrs. Evelyn Sampson TV. Thank you for watching.